associate with is patently unfair and it's unacceptable. So, to correct this situation and restore fairness, all we need is clarity in Ontario's labour laws. And that's what my bill, the Fair and Open Tendering Act, would offer. If passed, Bill 73 would add a very clear definition to the Labour Relations Act for public sector employers that would exempt municipalities and school boards from the province's collective bargaining rules for the construction industry. By making this legislative change, we would save Ontario taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars every year by preserving and restoring the ability of municipalities and school boards to openly tender contracts for large infrastructure projects. And more important, we would reinstate the rights of qualified contractors who have been unfairly barred from working on public infrastructure in cities like Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie. Because Bill 73 would exempt municipalities and school boards from the construction sections of the Act, I took great care to ensure that the bargaining relationship between workers and their employers would be preserved. My bill does this by transitioning the relationship from the construction sections of the Labour Relations Act to the industrial sections of the Act. So, if municipal employees still choose to be affiliated with the Carpenters Union, they would be able to do so under my bill, but only under sections 1 to 125 of the Act would apply. Carrying out this transition falls well within the purview of the province's constitutional authority to shape the bargaining structure for its workers, and it protects workers' freedom of association under Section 2D of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The Divisional Court, the Ontario Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court of Canada have all established the precedent which provides the legal foundation for my bill. Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin pointed out as much in Ontario versus Fraser when she said, quote, "The Ontario legislature is not required to provide a particular form of collective bargaining rights. The affirmation of the right to collective bargaining is not an affirmation of a particular type of collective bargaining. What Section 2D protects is the right to associate to achieve collective goals, not a particular process or result." And in a lengthy legal opinion which I gave to all members of the House, Mark Freeman, a Learner's law firm lawyer, points out the case law precedent and Supreme Court jurisprudence established that Bill 73 is in fact constitutional. Given the sound legal case for this proposal and the added provision to protect workers' rights, I think it's quite clear that Bill 73 is not a union or a non-union issue. It is truly an issue of fairness. Fairness for municipalities, for contractors, for workers, and ultimately for taxpayers. Yes. Because of this balanced and fair approach, Bill 73 has won the support of unionized contractors, construction associations, and municipalities across the province. In fact, Bill 73 has been officially endorsed by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So I'd like to thank AMO President Russ Powers for the endorsement and for being with us here today. I appreciate your support both in your role at AMO and as a Hamilton City Councillor when you voted to support open tendering. Now, we have heard some fear-mongering from a different Hamilton City Councillor who unfortunately doesn't really understand this issue. And he has made some demonstrable false statements about Bill 73 this summer to the detriment of his constituents. So I would just like to caution members of the opposite side listening to one lone voice while ignoring the voice of 440 municipalities. I think it would be a tragic mistake to accept the comments of one misinformed councillor at the expense of alienating and undermining hundreds of municipalities, thousands of contractors, and millions of hard-working Ontarians. So let me be clear. Members opposite can stand with one councillor or with the entire municipal community, which includes the mayors and regional chairs of Ontario and the large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario. So, I hope every member of this legislature agrees with our municipal colleagues, because at a time when the province is facing a $60 billion infrastructure deficit, we need to do everything in our power to stretch our infrastructure dollars as far as possible. So I'm asking all members of this House to take a stand for taxpayers today and vote in favor of Bill 73. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Kitchener-Waterloo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When first approached by the member from Kitchener-Conestoga about the certification issue and his private member's bill, I genuinely felt that he was looking to solve a local problem. But upon further investigation and research, the bill revealed itself to be quite problematic. This is a reactionary and premature bill that will create more problems than it solves. It is unfortunate that the member from Kitchener-Conestoga has crafted a bill that tramples and undermines current, existing collective agreements in Toronto, Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, and the Windsor-Essex School Board, deliberately making it impossible for us to support. The last time this legislature tried to tear up existing collective agreements, we were talking about Bill 115. That mess, that process, supported by the Liberals and the PCs at the time, created is ongoing, and the resolution through the court system will be costly to every Ontarian. Just as we stood against the draconian legislation of Bill 115, which, like this bill, is attempting to do, undermine existing contracts, this legislation would effectively render the current municipal and one school board master agreements collectively bargained, fairly bargained, with the building trades in Toronto, Hamilton, Windsor-Essex, and Sault Ste. Marie null and void. Instead of proposing exemption options for municipalities and perhaps reviewing the current system, this legislation uses a hammer when careful consideration is required. The fact that the entire Ontario construction trade sector strongly opposed this bill and that the construction contractors in Kitchener-Waterloo region are split suggests that this bill is not the answer to a very complex situation. While in principle there are valid arguments, pro and con, as to whether municipalities should be considered construction employers under the Ontario Labour Relations Act, Bill 73 is a badly constructed piece of legislation which is premature. This matter is still before the board, the Ontario Labour Relations Board. No decision has been made under the relevant sections of the Act. What is needed is an objective and thoughtful look at the process and consideration potentially for modernization by an objective and respected voice, perhaps like Harry Arthur's. To suggest that costs will go up by hundreds of millions of dollars is false. The numbers cited don't add up. And I realize it may very well be too late to inject some facts into this story, but it is worth trying. Please note that an exhaustive City of Toronto report on the possible impact of going non-union estimates savings at 1.7%, and that's assuming that these savings would be passed on to the city by a lower bid. This report is a staff report. It's labour and training costs in construction procurement 2007. It is a matter of public record. The Toronto report is by far the best evidence-based study on this issue, but of course it is not referenced by the member from Kitchener-Conestoga. And while the PC party would like to tear up existing collective agreements, we feel strongly that negotiating contracts on the floor of the legislature comes with a cost. We have processes in place in this province, and one is currently playing out at the Ontario Labour Relations Board right now. When we ignore the processes that we have previously agreed to, we end up creating problems, not solving them. In this place, in this House, we need to be talking about the problems facing Ontarians and coming up with solutions to those problems. And I hear from my constituents about how we can create more and better jobs in Ontario, how we can build a stronger, more effective healthcare system, and how we can implement changes to make life more affordable for people feeling the squeeze in this province. This bill has been used to divide rather than unite in a common cause. It is ironic that the member referenced fear-mongering in his comments. In summary, Bill 73 is like using a sword to do surgery, which will significantly alter existing labour relations in this province. It is not the solution, but I remain open to exploring options that could modernize what everyone would agree is an overly complex system of province-wide master agreements, a function of countless legislative and collective bargaining compromises going back many decades. To suggest that this private member's bill is a panacea and or a solution to how provincial master agreements are struck is false. Legislation is premature. The matter is still before the Labour Relations Board, and it would be premature to legislate on this issue. The last time this Assembly opened collective agreements on the floor of this legislature, we paid the price, we compromised trust in this House and in this process. I would urge the members of this House to not support Bill 73.
Thank you. Further debate? The Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker. It's my pleasure to join in this debate. First of all, I think I'm going to try to distill very simply what I understand the intent of the bill, and then tell you why I think it's a bad thing. It's a very complicated. It's a short piece of legislation. It's only 2 pages long, but there's a couple of difficult concepts to understand here. And I think if we get our heads around those 2 or 3 basic concepts, then right-thinking people will vote the right way, which is to vote against it. So, let me tell you this, because it's passing strange that today the member opposite, PC Party, is bringing this legislation forward, and it's designed to do this. Right now, for the construction industry in Ontario, there's provision for province-wide bargaining in certain municipalities and school boards. So the construction trades hammer out a contract, and it applies to all of the municipalities and all of the school boards. That's the way the law stands today. And this bill is designed to change that law to say this: province-wide bargaining in the construction industry and the public sector does not apply across the board throughout Ontario, but that it should be left up to the individual municipalities or individual hospitals or other public institutions to say, we want to opt out of the province-wide agreement. All right, so those are the 2 choices: province-wide agreement and the bill which is designed to let everybody opt out of it if they want in the public sector. Now, what's really interesting is that the legislation that the member opposite's bill is trying to attack is legislation that the Conservative government brought in the year 2000 and then refined it, I think, a little later while they were still in power. In effect, they brought the bill in once, and then they brought in some amendments to it to make it even stronger, so that there was province-wide bargaining in the construction trades with public sector entities, hospitals, school boards, and so on. So it's passing strange that here we are, we've been in government 10 years, so 10 years later, their legislation has been in place. They brought it, they introduced it in the year 2000. We've lived with it through their years, through our years, and now they want to amend it. And they say that this is necessary because there are some hospitals, there are some municipalities and other public sectors that want to opt out of these province-wide agreements in the construction trade. But here's the rub. The provision to opt out of these province-wide agreements already exists. So I take the example of the member opposite for the riding of Kitchener. Kitchener-Conestoga? Yes, Kitchener-Conestoga. So take the city of Kitchener. So the city of Kitchener, and frankly, I don't know if what the situation is there, but let's take the example that the city of Kitchener wants to opt out of the province-wide agreement regarding construction contracts that the city of Kitchener is engaged in. They don't want to be a part of that province-wide bargaining regime. There is provision in the Ontario Labour Relations Act and in other legislation where the city of Kitchener can come down to Toronto, file an application before the Ontario Labour Relations Board and say, we, the city of Kitchener, do not want to be a part of of across-the-board public sector construction. We don't want to be caught by these broad agreements. And
Member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, if you wish to heckle, I would ask you to sit in your seat.
yeah, then what the Ontario Labour Relations Board says, quite fairly and quite properly, because this is its job, it says to the City of Kitchener, all right, well, the existing regime is that these collective agreements involving the construction trades and municipalities and hospitals and other public sector things applies across the board, province-wide, but you can, if you tell us why, and it's a good argument, and it makes sense, and it meets some other criteria, we will give you permission to opt out. So that's what the City of Kitchener could do. Come down, make the application, make their argument why they want to opt out. The trade union would probably make the argument why they should not be allowed to opt out, and the independent members of the Ontario Labour Relations Board would hear both sides of the argument and make its decision. Yes, Kitchener, you can get out. No, Kitchener, you can't. That provision exists for every municipality, every hospital, every public sector entity that has to deal with the construction trades. So I scratch my head on one side, I scratch my head on the other side, and I say, why is the member bringing forward this bill? Because what he wants to achieve by this bill is already possible in the Ontario Labour Relations Act. So it doesn't make any sense. I can only suspect that there is some, I don't know, local political issue there that the member's trying to deal with. In short, this is a piece of legislation. This is a piece of legislation that is unnecessary, because what the member is trying to achieve by the legislation is already possible under the Act. All the municipality or the hospital or the other public sector entity has to do is make an application to the Ontario Relations Board, make an argument why they should be opted out, let the construction trade respond why they shouldn't be opted out, and the independent members of the Ontario Labour Relations Board will decide the issue. Members of the Ontario Labour Relations Board are made up of representatives from the private sector, the union sector, the public sector, and so on. And they usually strike these panels. Might be a panel of 3 Labour Relations Board members. Might be someone, typically they have someone representing the private sector, they have someone representing the public sector, they have someone representing the union sector. They'll hear the arguments and they'll make their decision. So this is a piece of legislation with this provision to go to the Ontario Relations Board and make an argument to opt out, that is something that the Conservative government brought in. They brought it in because they thought that was the fair way to do it. Province-wide agreements for the construction trades and all the public sector and municipalities, with the provision that any municipality or public sector entity has a mechanism to opt out. I just stand to be corrected. I gave a wrong date there. The original legislation was brought in by the Conservative Party in 1998. They brought the original legislation in 1998, and they refined it and amended it in the year 2000. So I ask why, after all these years, they suddenly want to wreck a piece of legislation that has worked well across the province. It has got that safety provision in it. It has got that safety provision in it that it is possible to opt out of it. So I say to my friend opposite from Kitchener-Conestoga, if your municipality wants to opt out of it, if they're the ones that are encouraging you to bring forward this private members bill, you should go to them. You should go to them and refer them to the Ontario Labour Relations Act. I'll dig up the section number and the subsection numbers. I'll even give you some case law on it, and you can take it in a folder and give it to them and say, go to the Labour Relations Board, make your application to opt out, because that's what the safety mechanism is for. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate, the member for Leeds-Grenville.
Thank you, Speaker. As the Ontario PC critic for municipal affairs and housing, I'm pleased to have a few moments to speak about Bill 73. And I first want to commend the member for Kitchener-Conestoga for the tremendous amount of work that he has done prior to bringing this legislation forward. In the finest traditions of this place, he's identified a long-standing problem facing municipalities and school boards across the province, and he's drafted a very reasonable bill, I suggest, to deal with those issues. Open tendering gives municipal councils the tools to ensure that they can go out and get the best possible price for infrastructure projects. So I'm so proud, Speaker, to stand in support of this bill, which protects local taxpayers by giving them the highest quality and the best bang for the buck. But my colleague's done much more than that prior to bringing this excellent bill forward. And I'm so proud at how he's worked to reach out to municipalities and school boards to earn their support. And it's this tremendous amount of support that he's received from those municipal leaders in every corner of the province that I'm going to focus my comments on today, because it's important as legislators that we listen to our municipal partners. And really, what the member's done today with this legislation is really something that I suggest that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing should have done as she was out having a conversation with our municipal leaders. But if she'd done that, then I think she would have been able to walk across to the Minister of Labour and get those reforms that the member has proposed into a bill. But I did notice that we've got some good news that that perhaps we can get both those ministers on the record today. I saw the minister over in the West Members Gallery speaking to the AMO president. I hope he talked some sense into you, Minister, and I hope that you will support this legislation. Now, the member for Kitchener-Conestoga did have a meeting at the AMO conference regarding Bill 73. I had the pleasure of attending that meeting and met with a number of municipalities about the subject. And I can tell you, Speaker, that that mayors and councillors across this province spoke in the hallways at AMO and spoke very favourably of that. And Speaker, I don't want you to take my word for it. I want to put some comments on the record. I mentioned AMO, and I want to quote the letter from Russ Powers, the AMO president, who's here with us in the West Members Gallery. And I might want to remind members that AMO represents the 444 municipal governments that are in the province. His letter says, and I quote, "Dear Mr. Harris, at its August Board of Directors meeting, the AMO Board supported a private member's bill that you tabled. Municipalities should be able to tender construction work in a free and open competitive environment to gain the most value for construction expenditures. We agree with your approach. Thank you for recognizing the fiscal constraints under which municipalities operate and for tabling this bill." Unquote. That's a pretty resounding issue of support, Speaker, and I'm far from finished with the endorsements. Marco, the mayors and regional chairs of Ontario of single-tier cities and regions endorsed a motion supporting 73. In a letter, Marco Chair and Waterloo Region Chair Ken Sealing writes, and I quote, "We wish to emphasize that this is not a question of being anti-union. Rather, it is a question of what best serves the public interest. Given the substantial number of capital works projects undertaken by municipalities of Ontario every year, the implications are staggering. Our concern is that the cost escalations resulting from the situation may very well delay the implementation of key infrastructure projects that are critical to Ontario's economic success." Unquote. You know, Speaker, I could go on, but I have to wrap up in a few moments. But let me just give you a list of some supportive municipalities that include LUMCO, the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, cities like Hamilton, Kitchener, Stratford, Woodstock, the towns of Orangeville, Kirkland Lake, Penetanguishene, as well as committees at the regions of Waterloo and Niagara. Municipalities recognize that reforming the Labour Relations Act in the manner set out in Bill 73 is critical part of addressing our infrastructure needs in the province. Yes, we do need funding for these projects, But we also require a level playing field that ensures that every penny is spent wisely. Bill 73 does it. Again, I want to commend the member for Kitchener-Conestoga, and I want to encourage every MPP to support Bill 73. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Essex.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. No, I am not going to vote yes, as many of my colleagues in the to the right of me would probably have already guessed. But I do appreciate all of the comments, and I do, and I wear it proudly. And maybe that's the perspective that has not been brought to this debate today that I hope to offer members in the gallery and my colleagues here in the House, is that of the perspective of the worker. Prior to being elected in this House, I was, and still am, a proud member, card-carrying member of the Labourers Union of North America, a construction worker. I worked in the heavy sector for about 10 years, worked on the roads and bridges and sewers and water mains and in the ditches, a great field of work, and I was proud of the work that I did and accomplished, and to this day, whether it's a municipal project or a provincial project, when we go over those projects, I tell my kids, you know, Daddy worked on that bridge, and I enjoyed it. And what that did for me, Mr. Speaker, was that it afforded me really a wonderful living. It afforded me the ability to be married, to buy our first home, to raise 2 kids, to purchase vehicles, and to make ends meet. And now the workers that sign a card to become unionized, they don't do that arbitrarily, Mr. Speaker. At least the ones who did that prior to me coming on board to ensure that the company that I worked for was signatory to a union. They made a conscious decision to elevate, to raise the standards of their working condition. They knew that within that jurisdiction, within that scope of work, there was a fair wage that they should be compensated by. And this goes to the heart of the debate, that we have unions in this country. We have legal representation and the right to be represented by a collective agreement and by a bargaining unit. And those rules have never changed and will never change. I hope, I trust. That's one of the reasons why I do not think that this House should intervene in that long-standing, well-nuanced process. Now, I certainly have some compassion for municipalities. The member from Kitchener-Conestoga had mentioned that there are 440 that are supportive, and I can imagine why. I mean, the massive amount of downloading historically that's happened to municipalities, whether in social services or infrastructure needs, that has created such an enormous burden that municipalities would be scratching at every opportunity to save a nickel, to save a dime here, but yet the argument put forward by my friend, the member from Kitchener-Conestoga, is not one that is convincing. By and large, in the aggregate, union contractors are competitive with non-union contractors. They're doing the same scope of work. The margins on these jobs are really not that wide. You know, so when the member mentions that in you'll forgive the member from Brentford, forgive me for speaking while you were interrupting. I'll continue on my speech, but I certainly extended the same courtesy.
The member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, this is your last warning. I've asked you to relocate to your seat if you're going to heckle, and I just would like to carry on business.
Thank you, Speaker. I certainly didn't mean to get him in that much trouble. I quite often enjoy the interjections by the member. But needless to say, some of the facts that he presents almost sounds like an infomercial, you know. And I had to scratch for that word. It really sounds as though if you dismantle this collective agreement right now, things are going to be cheaper across the board day one. That is implausible. He has no facts or figures to back that up. In fact, what he is quoting, I believe, I will quote him. Quote, as soon as closed tendering began in Hamilton, infrastructure costs spiked by as much as 40%, Mr. Harris said, as the construction at the construction house in Hamilton. What Mr. Harris was referring to, I believe, was the Ivor Wynne Stadium project with the Infrastructure Ontario for the Pan Am Games 2014. He's saying no, but these are the facts that are related to your comments. The original staff and aldermen had confirmed that $80 million of the Ivor Wynne stadium was approved, Infrastructure Ontario were not satisfied with the renovations to the existing structure would be sufficient, and they decided to build a brand new stadium, which was estimated at $140 million. So, of course, you know, when you're using, you know, ambiguous facts like that, it's going to sound like an infomercial, 40% off or 40% more. Well, in fact, Mr. Speaker, it was a totally different scope of a project. It's not fair to make that comparison. Speaker, you know, ultimately, you know, I understand, again, back to the constraints that municipalities and school boards have these days. It's well known. We debate those issues in this House each and every day. One of the requirements for a healthy community, a healthy municipality, is a good base of good paying jobs to, you know, contribute to the tax base of that municipality. And what I've seen in this House is a valiant attempt, not only by the Conservatives, which you know, that's in your DNA. It's something that you're pre-programmed to do, ideologically driven, and I get it. That's why we get along sometimes. I get you, you get me, we get where we're coming from. But joined by the Liberals. So we've seen a bill come through this House similar in its intent to dismantle, circumvent a collective bargaining agreement between Ellis Don and several building trades. That's going to happen. You're going to do that. But today they're going to say, we're not helping you with this one. Tomorrow they're going to say, we'll help you with Bill 74, as you did, in a piecemeal approach with Bill 115 to circumvent the bargaining rights of teachers in this province. We don't make in this party, in the New Democratic Party, a habit of doing that. And we're not going to start now, right? Because the equation that's the social contract was a guy named Bob Ray, and if I'm not mistaken, he's on your team and should have always been on your team. But I'll tell you, I want to tell you that, and when the social contract, when the social contract was enacted, Mr. Speaker, I was 13 years old. I've grown up since then. I would hope the two other parties would grow up since then too as well, and understand that you can't continue to bash the workers in this province and expect any menial increase in our quality of life. You can't do it. Stop doing it. You're going to continue to do it, but we're telling you here you're making a mistake. We proved that you made a mistake with the teachers. This, again, is a cautionary tale, a slippery slope that I would caution members before embarking on. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member from Mississauga-Streetsville.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, why is this debate happening here in the legislature and not before the Ontario Labour Relations Board? And the answer comes down to one word and just one word, and that word is ideology. The fact of the matter is that this is just another piece of right-wing union bashing, and this is just part of the right-wing agenda to see what they can do to take apart unions in the province of Ontario. Now, the member for Kitchener-Conestoga, as my colleagues have explained, has made no case for why we need Ontario-wide legislation to hammer away at an issue that hasn't even been resolved within the Ontario Labour Relations Board. Why don't you leave it to the Ontario Labour Relations Board? The so-called solution would have the effect of imposing a Wild West legal status onto province-wide labour agreements, and the member offers up a case that a matter before the Ontario Labour Relations Board may be imbalanced, thus trying to preempt the Ontario Labour Relations Board. However, he doesn't offer any solutions using the existing remedies that the member from Willowdale pointed out exist aplenty. His solution basically says that if his type of thinking and his party have their way, and you get unionized, well, today they say construction, tomorrow it could be anything and everything. If you get unionized, you can simply just opt out. I just don't think that's much of a solution. If you've got a problem with whether a particular agreement is balanced, then resolve it using the tools available to you at the Ontario Labour Relations Board. This is somewhat similar to saying, why don't we just use a paint roller when what you really need is an edging brush? This is a government that does believe in fair and balanced labour negotiations, and the fact of the matter is that when you're bargaining a collective agreement, the parties are free to negotiate terms that do restrict the employer to contract only with unionized employees. However, If a party feels they should not be bound to a province-wide collective agreement, then they have the options that the member from Willowdale set out very clearly. Speaker, this is not the answer to any problem. This is just an expression of right-wing ideology, and I'm urging members to vote against it.
Thank you. Further debate? The member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's only a couple of points I want to make here. One, this is not about ideology at all. This is about fairness, and it's about what's right and what's wrong. Is it right to treat municipalities who build bridges, provide public service, do it all at taxpayer expense, that they're treated the same way as for-profit construction companies? It certainly is not, and it was never intended that that would happen. But the result of making that happen costs millions and millions of dollars. I know at the City of Toronto alone, it's been estimated that we lose $100 million a year because of limited tendering.
They don't care.
Now, I'll make my point quite quickly here.
They don't care.
If the people on that side of the room over there were the only ones in this room that could bid, if we were all contractors and all of a sudden only those people could bid, are we going to get the best prices? Well, we're not, because certainly someone on this side at some occasion is going to have a better price than those people.
Of course.
But because we don't get the benefit of that, the taxpayers have to pay more. This is only about saving and protecting tax dollars. This is a way for the province of Ontario to help municipalities and cut their costs without reducing service and without spending any tax dollars to do it. It makes common sense, and if you people can't see it, I don't know what the heck's wrong with you.
Thank you. Further debate? The member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House as the PC Labour critic today to support my colleague's bill, Bill 73, the Fair and Open Tendering Act. Speaker, this is a government, and we're seeing it again today, supported by the NDP, that refuses to ensure that public infrastructure contracts are negotiated in a fair and unbiased way, and that is something that my colleague's bill is seeking to remedy. A fair, open tendering process will ensure that projects are being funded as efficiently as possible, allowing municipalities and school boards to undertake additional projects, creating even more jobs for the people of this province. Of course, I don't need to remind anyone in this House that we have nearly 600,000 men and women today out of work, so it is vitally important that we make changes to allow companies and businesses to hire more people and to start growing our economy. Speaker, recently the London and District Construction Association conducted a month-long vote which culminated with their endorsement of this bill. The London and District Construction Association covers all aspects of the industry, from suppliers to contractors, and both unionized and non-unionized workers. The result of their vote was a unanimous show of support for this important bill today. What the LDCA said was that for public infrastructure projects, the process should be opened up to as many contractors as necessary to get the best price and best value for Ontario taxpayers. Speaker, as a member from Etobicoke Lakeshore said, this is total common sense. This bill is about making sure that hard-earned tax dollars are spent wisely. It is about making sure that we, as elected representatives, put in place the framework to build an open tendering system that gives more contractors the right to bid for public infrastructure jobs. The unnecessary red tape that is inherent in our labour laws and costing us jobs will be reduced by removing the barriers from contractors that they're facing when attempting to offer their services to the public sector. A government that truly wants to see a stable and prosperous Ontario would know that removing these barriers and streamlining the process for contractors, getting behind Ontario workers instead of standing in their way, must be a top priority. Speaker, I'm pleased to join with a member from Kitchener-Conestoga today and to support this bill. I hope that all members will make sure that job growth, fairness, transparency, and efficiency will be a top priority, Speaker, in this House when we're making decisions. I know that I'm supporting this bill because my constituents in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex have told me loud and clear that they are tired of having their tax dollars wasted, spent ineffectively by the McGuinty-Wynne Horwath government, Speaker. This is just a government, again, supported by the third party that is refusing to put forward good ideas. In fact, they're holding back important infrastructure projects here in the province of Ontario, Speaker. So I encourage all members, hopefully the third party will have a rethink before the vote shortly, Speaker, but I'm proud to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate? The member for Kitchener-Conestoga, you now have a total of 2 and 1.
Okay, 335. All right, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the comments from my colleagues, but I will especially thank those on this side of the House that have stood up for the public purse and taxpayers today. Steve Clark, our municipal affairs critic, Doug Holiday from Etobicoke Lakeshore, former Deputy Mayor of Toronto, and of course our new Labour critic, Monty McNaughton. Speaker, the reactionary responses by my honourable colleagues are both over the top and misinformed. I am saddened and deeply disappointed to see that certain members have resorted to fear-mongering and a deliberate campaign of misinformation. For the record, Bill 73 does not tear up any collective bargaining agreements. It would simply transition the collective bargaining relationship from the construction sections of the Labour Relations Act to the industrial sections of the Act. In other words, it would remove municipalities and school boards from existing province-wide agreements that apply to construction companies and require that public sector employers negotiate contracts with their workers under sections 1 to 125. As my honourable colleagues should have realized after reading the lengthy legal opinion I provided them with, it is well within the purview of the province to shape the bargaining structure for workers. With all of the due diligence done on this bill, I find it unbelievable any of the members opposite could be confused with its contents. In fact, when I met with the member for Kitchener-Waterloo, I would have been happy to take into consideration any of her suggestions, but she offered none. So it's clear. It's clear that the NDP and the Liberals have chosen to reject the interests of their constituents, their contractors that are here today, their municipalities, and of course Ontario taxpayers. First and foremost, Ontario taxpayers, the folks who this party have stood up to protect today. And the NDP and the Liberals have decided to oppose restoring fairness in the construction industry simply to appease the demands of the special interest groups who support them. Shame on you. Shame on you. And so we will continue. We will continue in Canada. We respect the right of people and its workers to work on public infrastructure. That is their right here in Canada. We talk a lot about rights. And you know, it is one's right, if they're a qualified contractor, like many of the folks in this legislature today, it is their right to work on public infrastructure, but you're denying that right. You're saying no, it's not fair. Well, today I proposed a sound, logical, clear bill that would protect fairness in Ontario and give workers their rights back, the ones that have lost that right to work on public infrastructure. And today I'm proud to stand up on behalf of my colleagues, our leader Tim Hudak, to restore that fairness, to stand up for the many of the to stand up for hundreds of municipalities across the province, thousands of contractors, and millions of taxpayers. We've done that, and we'll continue to do it. Thank you very much.